Do we know about Commissioner Collins?
He's supposed to be here.
If you want me to. Yeah. Which one? I'll now call the meeting to order. Thanks everybody for being here, and those that are watching at home, thanks for watching.
Good evening. Notice of a public meeting of the City Commission of the City of Brownsville pursuant to Chapter 551, Title 5 of the Texas Government Code, the Texas Open Meetings Act. Notice is hereby given that the City Commission of the City of Brownsville, Texas, in accordance with Article 5, Section 12 of the Charter of said city, will convene a regular meeting on Tuesday, February 18, 2020, at 5 p.m. in the Commission Chambers on the second floor of Brownsville City Hall, Old Federal Building, located at 1001 East Elizabeth Street, Brownsville, Cameron County, Texas. Would everyone please stand for the invocation and the Pledge of Allegiance?
Let's pray. Father God, we thank you for our nation. We thank you for the many blessings we have here. And Lord God, at this time of voting, we ask you to lead and guide our voters and give us the leaders that you know would be best for this nation, this state, and our communities. Lord God, we ask you to lead and guide our mayor and city commissioners and everybody presenting anything here tonight for the very best for the city of Brownsville, and we give you all the glory. In the name of Jesus Christ, amen. And we'll have a short time of moment of silence where everybody can add their prayers to what's been spoken. Amen.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one indivisible.
Thank you, Pastor.
We will begin with the first proclamation, First Presbyterian Church. If you all would please come up.
Welcome and thank you for coming. We do have a proclamation to read.
Hi, I'm going to read the proclamation. A proclamation of the City Commission of Brownsville, Texas, recognizing First Presbyterian Church, 170th anniversary, 170 years of service serving the Brownsville community. Whereas the 170th anniversary of the First Presbyterian Church of Brownsville, Texas is being celebrated, located on 435 Palm Boulevard, and serves in order to spread the love of God and the good news of Jesus Christ. And whereas the First Presbyterian Church of Brownsville, Texas history may be divided into two parts. From 1849 to 1910, it was a mission church, supported by mission funds and served for 60 years by missionaries. The second period of growth and expansion, starting in 1910, is characterized by its own support. And whereas the Reverend Daniel Baker was the first missionary, closely following Dr. Baker, the Reverend Hiram Chamberlain arrived in Brownsville unable to find a vacant house. He and his family lived on the Tub, Whiteville, a riverboat, and he held the first preaching services on Sunday and Wednesday nights on board the vessel. And whereas on February 23, 1850, the First Presbyterian Church was organized by the Reverend Chamberlain, being the first Protestant church on the Rio Grande River. And whereas the first church building was erected at the corners of East Elizabeth and 9th Streets, this building was destroyed by a hurricane in 1867, and it was replaced by a brick building dedicated on January 23, 1869. And whereas on December 11, 1927, a new edifice at the corner of Palm Boulevard and Elizabeth Streets was dedicated. The structure is a well-preserved example of a 20th century Gothic revival sanctuary. It features cast stone detailing, Gothic arches and windows, an irregularly arranged tower and bays, and the congregation continues to serve the area. And whereas First Presbyterian Church of Brownsville, Texas has built on the heritage of the Founding Fathers, which is its commitment to Christian values, its sponsorship of the first Boy Scout Troop No. 1 in the community for a strong scouting program for boys of all denominations, its missions and outreach in the local community, its continuing the legacy with contributions of moral welfare to the community, feeding the hungry, and whereas the music ministry of First Presbyterian Church has put a song of gladness in many a weary heart and encouraged all at every age and stage to praise God through instruments, handbells, hymns, and songs. The choir continues to render beautiful choral numbers. And whereas for the past 170 years, the mission and activities of First Presbyterian Church of Brownsville has been maintained by its committed and dedicated members and continues to believe that we are endowed by our Creator with certain inalienable rights, one of which is to worship God freely in a faith community that is warm, empathetic, and inspiring. And whereas, to those of you who enter our doors to worship and pray, we welcome you in the name of Christ and the heritage of those who have gone before us, that we may know and enjoy this fellowship. Let us give God grateful thanks and adoration. Now, therefore, we, the members of the City Commission of the City of Brownsville, Texas, by virtue of the authority vested by the charter of said city, and on behalf of all our citizens, do hereby recognize First Presbyterian Church for their 170th anniversary and for serving the Brownsville community for 170 years. Done on this day, 18th day of February 2020. Thank you.
What a history. Beautiful.
Congratulations. Hi.
Thank you. Yes, thank you.
The next proclamation is for Harmony Public Schools Board. If y'all would please come up.
A proclamation of the city, or are you going to call it, right? Did you call it already? Okay. A proclamation of the City Commission of Brownsville, Texas, recognizing Harmony Public Schools Board. Whereas the mission of the public schools is to meet the diverse educational needs of all children and to empower them to become competent, productive contributors to a democratic society and an ever-changing world. And whereas local school boards members are committed to children and believe that all children can be successful learners and that the best education is tailored to the individual needs of the child. And whereas local school board members work closely with parents, educational professionals, and other community members to create the educational vision we want for our students. And whereas local school board members are responsible for ensuring the structure that provides a solid foundation for our school system. And whereas local school board members are strong advocates for public education and are responsible for communicating the needs of the school district to the public and the public's expectations to the school district. Now, therefore, we, the members of the City Commission of the City of Brownsville, Texas, by virtue of the authority vested by the charter of said city, and on behalf of all of our citizens, do hereby recognize and honor Harmony Public Schools Board and encourage the residents of Brownsville to prioritize the education of our future leaders today for the promise of tomorrow. Done on this, the 18th day of February, 2020.
Thank you. Yes.
Sorry. Well, just on behalf of Harmony here in Brownsville, we have been in the community for the past 12 years, and we're very grateful for those that, do choose us as your child's educator. We always have our doors open to give you school tours, to give you more information about the great things we have to offer to our community. I am Ms. Betancourt. I am the PR and outreach coordinator for both of our Brownsville campuses. So we gladly welcome you with open arms, and we want to show you what we have to offer in the best education for your children.
Thank you.
Have a good evening.
Next proclamation, Bleeding Disorders Awareness Month. Y'all would please come forward.
Welcome.
This is a proclamation of the City Commission of Brownsville, Texas, designating March as the Bleeding Disorders Awareness Month. Whereas this designation will formalize and expand upon the designation 30 years ago of March 1986 as Hemophilia Awareness Month by President Ronald Reagan. And whereas the Federal Department of Health and Human Services designated March as the National Bleeding Disorders Month. In 2019, 25 state and 54 local governments passed a proclamation or resolution declaring March as Bleeding Disorders Awareness Month. And whereas the designation will elevate awareness of and sensitivity to inheritable bleeding disorders, enabling the prevention of illness and necessary procedures and disability. And whereas bleeding disorder advocates during this month wear a red material around their neck, for example, a scarf or a tie. Over 1,000 advocates in 2019 wore a red material to their state capital. And whereas this awareness month in Brownsville will generate greater awareness and understanding of not only hemophilia, but all inheritable bleeding disorders, including von Willebrand disease, which alone impacts an estimated 1% of the U.S. population or more than 3.2 million individuals. This awareness month will foster a greater sense of community and shared purpose among individuals with all inheritable bleeding disorders. Now therefore, we, the members of the City Commission of the City of Brownsville, Texas, by virtue of the authority vested by the charter of said city and on behalf of all our citizens, do hereby designate March as Bleeding Disorders Awareness Month and to enhance the understanding of bleeding disorders and to encourage the participation in voluntary activities. Done on this, the 18th day of February, 2020.
Do you mind going to the podium? We can barely hear you. Thanks.
On behalf of the Bleeding Disorders Awareness and my son here, who is a bleeding disorders patient, we want to thank you all for this proclamation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next proclamation from Ms. Hannah Edelstein. If you all would please come forward.
Mom and Dad can come
Mom,
up as well.
Y'all can come up.
Yeah.
It's a proud moment.
This is a proclamation of the City Commission of Brownsville, Texas, recognizing and honoring Hannah Edelstein. Whereas Hannah Jordan Edelstein is the daughter of Mr. Morris and Patricia Edelstein and raised in Brownsville, Texas. Whereas Hannah Jordan Edelstein is a senior at Veterans Memorial Early College High School and is valedictorian of her graduating class of 2020, who is recognized as a National Hispanic Recognition Scholar. Whereas Hannah Jordan Edelstein is a leader in many organizations at her high school, including President of the National Honor Society, President of Health Occupation Students of America, Future Health Professionals, School Ambassador for Rio Grande LEAD, and has earned numerous awards and honors, including her Gold Award with the Girl Scouts of America, President's Volunteer Service Award, and the Yale Bassett Award for Community Engagement. And whereas Hannah Jordan Edelstein volunteers for numerous organizations in our community, including the Friendship of Women, the Gladys Porter Zoo Education Department, and has initiated conservation and educational projects involving our red crown parrots in South Texas and her Cleaning for Independence project at our local women's shelter. And whereas Hannah Jordan Edelstein was selected as the Brownsville Good Citizen by the Du Bois Height Chapter National Society Daughters of the American Revolution because of her dedication to community and all her wonderful contributions. And whereas Hannah Jordan Edelstein was selected as the State Good Citizen by the Texas Society of the Daughters of the American Revolution because of her hard work and outstanding efforts. Now, therefore, we, the members of the City Commission of the City of Brownsville, Texas, by virtue of the authority vested by the charter of said city, and on behalf of all of our citizens, do hereby recognize and honor Hannah Jordan Edelstein, and further call upon the citizens of Brownsville to congratulate her for the honor she is receiving today and encourage her to continue her commitment to excellence in our community. Done on this 18th day of February 2020, signed by the Mayor and the City Commission.
Bravo.
Good evening, Mayor Mendez, honorable commissioners, and community members. Thank you. It is my honor in being presented the City of Brownsville proclamation for being selected as our state representative for the Texas Society of Daughters of the American Revolution Good Citizens Award. I currently attend Veterans Memorial Early College High School and have been blessed to have a wonderful principal, counselors, teachers, and parents who have always supported my ideas and projects involving issues advocating for women and healthy teens. I have been an active Girl Scout for 12 years in addressing my community's needs. I am an advocate in the prevention of family violence and teen dating violence, and will continue to volunteer in service organizations throughout my life. Because I am passionate about creating healthy and safe environments, I am inspired to study medicine and continue advocating for women. I have been accepted to Yale University, as well as several other universities, and have been invited to attend an early acceptance medical school program. In the fall, I will major in cellular, molecular, and developmental biology, then hopefully attend medical school and bring awareness to medical issues involving women and families in underserved communities. I love my community as each of you do. My dream is to continue to be an active member in my community by returning to Brownsville after earning my medical degree to help women and families in receiving quality medical care. Again, thank you for recognizing me as the Texas Society of Daughters of the American Revolution Good Citizens Award recipient.
Thank you. And please come back to Brownsville when you're done. We're going to hold you to it. We all heard that.
Next, we have the Villalon family honoring Specialist Miguel Angel Villalon. If you would please come forward.
Welcome. Hello. A proclamation of the City Commission of Brownsville, Texas, honoring Specialist Miguel Angel Villalon. Whereas Specialist Miguel Angel Villalon was born and raised in Brownsville, Texas until the age of 14, then moved to Aurora, Illinois, and attended East Aurora High School and graduated after completing his ROTC. And whereas Specialist Miguel Angel joined the Army on November 6, 2018, and after completing basic combat training and advanced individual training in March of 2019 at Fort Leonard Wood in Missouri, he was assigned to Fort Bragg, North Carolina's 82nd Airborne, and completed in May 2019, where he served as a combat engineer. And whereas Specialist Miguel Angel was deployed to Afghanistan in July of 2019, where he served as an airborne combat engineer, Miguel Angel has always said, expect the unexpected, and on January 11, 2020, he was sent on a mission and he gave his life for his country. And whereas Specialist Miguel Angel's awards and decorations include the Purple Heart, the Bronze Star Medal, the Army Commendation Medal, the Army Achievement Medal with a C device, the Army Achievement Medal, the Army Good Conduct Medal, and the Combat Action Badge. He was promoted to Specialist after his passing. And whereas Specialist Miguel Angel completed his dream of joining the military and will forever remain a hero in our hearts. Now, therefore, we, the members of the City Commission of the City of Brownsville, Texas, by virtue of the authority vested by the Charter of said city, and on behalf of all of our citizens, do hereby honor Specialist Miguel Angel Villalon for his act of dedication and courage to our country, done on this 18th day of February, 2020. That was a hard proclamation to get through. Would you like to say something?
This was very short notice to me. I live in Chicago, and I got told on Saturday, hey, this is going on. So I drove down, picked him up in San Antonio, so we just got here today.
Welcome.
And on behalf of us, we'd like to thank everyone for everything that's been done. We continue to be so proud of him, everything he accomplished, and everything he did for everyone. We thank you very much.
Thank you. We're also very proud of your son, and sincere thank you and a debt of gratitude to you and your family.
Next, we have the public comment period. If Ms. Rachel Ayala would please come forward.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. I'm short, so I'm going to adjust the mic.
Can you just please introduce yourself to us, and
Yes.
you'll have 3
Yes.
minutes, ma'am.
Honorable Mayor Mendez, City Commissioners, and City staff. My name is Rachel Ayala, retired Assistant Superintendent for BISD. For 45 years, I started teaching at the age of 19. I was a principal and assistant superintendent for the Hannah Lopez and Porter cluster. I am a product of the Southmost area. I lived at 2544 Southmost Road at the corner of 26 and Southmost, where the Wells Fargo Bank is now, and where my father had a small grocery store. There, I would pump gas and check tires. We were the last house on Southmost Road. Beyond us were cotton fields where the trucks would stop to buy food in the morning before heading out to the fields. My father, Refugio Medina, an honorable man and godfather for the community, instilled in us that since he was not a rich man, that his inheritance to us was an education that no one could take away from us. He taught us to always treat everyone with the same dignity and respect regardless of economical status and position. Ladies and gentlemen, it takes a village to raise a child, and I choose to be actively participating member of my village. I applaud your efforts in what you do for our community, but I would like to bring it to your attention that the Southmost area has been discriminated in the equity of library facilities. The Southmost Library in no way compares to the facility at the Central Library. Since I retired, I volunteered for 6 years, and I can assure you that no major changes have taken place other than better lighting 2 months ago. Your library board has not met at the Southmost facility in 2 years. It really takes a community to raise children, no matter how much money anyone has. No one can do it well alone, and it is the Brownsville security community that we, our children, need. All children have with them the potential to be great, outstanding members of our community. It is our job to create a great world and facilities where this potential can flourish. We, as a community, need to fill a child's bucket of self-esteem so high that the rest of the world cannot poke enough holes to drain it dry. It is not our job to toughen our children to face a cruel and heartless world. It is our job to raise children who will make the world a less cruel and heartless. You inherited this challenge. I ask you to correct this discrimination and inequity in library facilities for future generations of children that you will be instrumental in forming. I invite you to visit the Southmost Library. Since time is of the essence, I have a folder that I will be giving to the city secretary to forward to you, and this includes the discrimination and equity of facilities, less hours of accessibility, and a mile chart for our surrounding schools to travel to the Central Library, creating a hardship since sometimes they don't have the necessary means of transportation. I would like to thank Delia Aguilar, principal at Lopez High School, and the parents from Lopez High School for coming in support of their children. I thank all of you for your time and dedication in serving the Brownsville community, since it's not an easy task. And I especially like to thank Commissioner Galaski for already visiting the Southmost Library. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ayala. The next public comment is by Ms. Reba McNair. If you would please come forward.
She's not here.
We'll move on to the next agenda item, which is work session, discussion regarding the airport master plan.
Good evening, Mayor, City Commissioners. We've been working on the airport master plan for the last several years. We're in the final stretch of putting together the final draft. Actually, the final draft is already completed and submitted to the FAA. I'd like to introduce Julie from Jacobs. She'll present a work session kind of outlining the final product of the airport master plan. And then towards the end of the City Commission, we'll come back to you with adopting in a resolution. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to Julie.
Hi, and thank you. My name is Julie Filippo, and I'm working with Jacobs. So I'm here to give you a presentation on the airport master plan. And so,
You can raise the podium there. There's a button right there somewhere. There you go.
okay, is that better?
Yes.
Okay. Oh, this apparently I'm not sure I can use the pointer.
Let me try doing it from here.
Okay. Okay, I can, maybe what we try to fix this, I can start talking about where we were at. So the airport master plan consists of two elements, an airport master plan narrative report and an airport layout plan, which is a set of plans. The airport master plan narrative report includes 10 different chapters and was submitted, both the report, the final report, and the airport layout plan were submitted to the FAA, the Federal Aviation Administration, and to the airport. So as part of the project, we included forecast of aviation demand, and the forecast of aviation demand including enplaned passengers, which are all the passengers enplaned at the airport. And so those forecasts are matching very closely with what we are seeing right now at the airport. And we had forecasts from the year 2018 through 2035, and so the forecasts are currently matching. We also had forecasts of international enplaned passengers, and so that's something we included. I'm on slide number 4.
Is that the one you're on?
Next one, and the one after. Yes, next one, and next one. So we included this to be conservative, and the airport is obviously working on getting new frequency. So this was included in the airport master plan. Next slide. We also included forecast of cargo traffic at the airport, which included both inbound and outbound cargo traffic, and using combined air and land cargo. Then we also included forecast of general aviation using FAA guidelines and FAA TAF, and so we had a conservative approach with number of based aircraft and aircraft operations at the airport. As far as the airport layout plan, as I mentioned, this is a set of plans depicting the airport configuration, existing configuration, and future configuration. So what you can see right here is the existing airport layout plan, and it depicts existing facility at the airport. And then we do have a set of plans depicting future facility at the airport, which is right there. We also, as part of the airport layout plan, there is also a terminal area plan which is included and which depicts what is currently going on at the airport with the construction of the new terminal building and then construction of additional automobile parking. There are also general aviation, which are identified for future general aviation traffic, and this is really based on demand, so it's only built when the demand is here, but it's a conservative approach to include it on the airport layout plan. There's also some sheet depicting cargo and future cargo facilities, which again are also dependent on demand and are only being built when demand is actually there. As part of the project, we also add a capital improvement plan and a financial analysis. So the capital improvement plans included order of magnitude cost for each project, for each planning activity level, which is 0 to 5, 5 to 10, and 10 to 20, and 20 years and beyond. And so the dollar amounts were escalated using a 4% rate. So those are cost estimates, and those are very fluid because they are depending on exactly when the projects will take place. And last but not least, we prepared a financial analysis estimating the funding sources and anticipating the use of FAA, Federal Aviation Administration, Airport Improvement Program grants, passenger facility charges, tax dot grants, private or third-party funding, and bonds. And the costs were allocated to all those funding sources, depending on what would be available and what was planned to be available. So that's a brief summary of the project, and if you have any question, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Anybody have any questions? I don't have anything for now. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Next, we have a work session discussion regarding the LGBTQ task force, its composition and application process.
Hi, good evening. Sorry, we're back. Yeah, we brought paper copies just in case.
Okay.
Good evening, Mayor, Commissioners. I'm Joe Colonuvayas. I'm here with Vicente Martinez, Stephanie Dominguez, and Maria Cordero, some of the folks who were here presently when the Commission voted to approve the LGBTQ task force, which is something that we're still very grateful for. It's a very exciting time for our city. There's a lot of doors opening for pretty much everybody, and we're excited to be a part of our community in a more visible way. So when we came together to think about how this task force was going to be put together, we, in meeting with Assistant City Manager, realized that we wanted to make sure that our commissioners and mayor who will be appointing people to this group have one-on-one, right, on like, what does LGBTQ mean, right? It's the buzzword that we hear a lot of the time. And then we also had some cultural values or things to look out for when reviewing applications whenever those become open, so that the commissioners have a way to sort of gauge the type of people that would be great as a fit for this group. And this isn't working. Okay. So the first page, the first thing we go over is obviously orientation, right? Basically breaking down what does LGB mean. L is lesbian, a woman who has romantic or emotional attraction to another woman. Gay, an adjective used to describe someone who also has a romantic or emotional attraction to someone of the same gender. And bisexual, someone who has an attraction to both genders, right? If we skip on, gender identity, this is a big one because in our community, the trans community is the most vulnerable. So when we think about gender identity, this is basically one's internal sense of being either male, female, or neither, or both. Gender is very expansive like that, the way we like to think about it. And everyone has a gender identity, including you. So for trans people, their gender assigned at birth and their gender identity are not always the same. A lot of the times, we also have to look at sex assigned at birth. The assignment and classification of people as either male, female, intersex, or another sex assigned at birth, often based on physical anatomy or. Then we go over to gender identity, important terms, right? So when we think about transgender, we also think about cisgender. So transgender means it's an umbrella term for people whose gender identity differs from the sex they were assigned at birth. And cisgender basically means that you identify as a gender that you were assigned at birth. And if we continue on, and then queer is this wonderful catch-all term. I know a lot of people, older people, have reservations in using this term because in some point of our cultural history, it was a derogatory term. I think in terms of cultural politics, that term has been reclaimed by the community as an okay term to use to describe the queer community as a broad umbrella term. And then we can continue on. And then gender expression is the physical manifestation of one's gender identity through clothing, hairstyle, voice, body, shape. The best way I can think about this is me when I'm in drag. So, and yeah, so that's a very basic LGBTQ breakdown. We can go on. One of the things that we wanted to address in the composition of a task force would be to go back to a comment Commissioner Golonsky made when the commission voted on the group, was to make sure that the task force would be as diverse as our community. We hope the commission is able to consider appointing trans, gender nonconforming individuals, women as well as gay men to this group. So for example, having a task force made up of just gay men may not be an honest representation of all the perspectives and lived experiences represented within our community, right? Another great piece of information we wanted to share was this individual quality and value assessment for LGBTQ task force candidates. So basically, these are the cultural competencies that we would like to see in people that are going to be making a part of this group. This is actually something that we pulled from the LGBTQ Quality of Life Advisory Commission from the City of Austin. At one point, they were looking for a city manager, so they put out a memo to the city of Austin saying, hey, these are the type of things that we want you to look out for when hiring a city manager, right? And so we think those are great values, again, as a starting point for this group, right? So if we go on to the next slide. So these are some of the challenges that our community faces, right? Violence. Our community experiences violence at a disproportionately high rate compared to the rest of the population. Locally, when we think of Kimberly Avila, who's still missing, that's a very good representation of violence that happens within our community and violence that goes unanswered. Employment discrimination. This is job discrimination due to orientation and gender identity, which unfortunately is still legal in Texas. Poverty. Because of employment discrimination, LGBTQ people face high rates of unemployment, homelessness, and food insecurity. Then we also think about healthcare. Social stigmas associated with queer identity contribute to health disparities for our community. The big one I can think about is HIV and how it disproportionately impacts gay, bisexual, same-gender loving men and trans women. So these are concerns that are things that we want people that are coming into this group to think about, right? And the last one is discrimination in public accommodations, right? Trans, gender nonconforming individuals often encounter discrimination when using public restrooms and other gender-specific facilities. And this just may even be how you are perceived by someone, right? So you may not even be part of our community, but if someone perceives you to be a part of our community, they tend to some people have a tendency to want to discriminate, which is what happened in our community with someone who was also part of the group that came initially to advocate for the task force. And then, so this is what we took from the City of Austin LGBTQ Commission. Locally, we were trying to think of other things that are impacting our community and things that we want people to consider as people who have experience in these backgrounds for Brownsville. So youth. LGBTQ youth often face more disparities than their straight counterparts. We think about bullying, with little to no resources available to them. Local school districts in the Rio Grande Valley and Brownsville often are hostile to public school students who want to create gay-straight alliance groups on their campus, despite federal laws that protect their rights to do so. So, things to consider. And then also immigration. We want people to have an understanding of that intersection of queer identity and immigration, right? That's like we live on the border, that's like a really big flag, right? So during the last couple of years, we witnessed an increase in reports of LGBTQ asylum seekers, migrants who are even more vulnerable to violence, harassment, discrimination, both at the hands of federal agents and just people who are discriminating against them. And so the last thing we want to share is that for the City of Brownsville, this may be a first group of its kind, but there are a lot of nonprofits in the Rio Grande Valley and in Brownsville who are doing work actively supporting our community. One of the bigger ones I can think of is Valley AIDS Council. They have 3 clinics, one here in Washington Street. South Texas Equality Project, the ACLU of Texas, the Texas Freedom Network, Gender Equality Network of Texas, which works with the trans community in McAllen, Texas. Planned Parenthood Texas Votes, they're an advocacy group, and Planned Parenthood South Texas, which is a clinic section. And so whenever these applications do become open from the city manager's office, and you all start reviewing these applicants, I think that you would consider these things when reviewing those applications. And then also, if you have any questions, we encourage you to reach out to these organizations. They've all, in some way, have known about what we're doing here and are very excited to support us and to support y'all as well, because now we're all in this together. Any
Thanks.
questions?
When
I
are
know
we?
that was a lot.
When are we going to plan to put this together? Actually, open it up for applications.
We can open it now. We were waiting since
Okay.
Mrs. Walker was coordinating
Right,
with the
right.
group. But I think just in looking at the information that was presented, the commission may want some time to evaluate this. I think also finding the candidate pool. So we can bring it back in 2 weeks, we can bring it back in a month. It's really up to the commission to let us know at this point. But we can open it up online.
Right.
Effective immediately.
I was going to say, yeah, we can open it up online, and then maybe if, depending on the applicant pool, we can consider the appointments for the next meeting, March, maybe. Depends on what the applicants look.
Sure. Or we can just let you all know
Okay.
what we have, and then you all can kind of guide us from there.
This is really good work. Thank you so much.
No, thank you. This is actually something a lot of people in this group came together to collaborate on. So thank you, Google. But also just the many minds and voices that want to see this happen in our city. And again, we're super grateful for this, and we look forward to next steps and making this happen.
Have you distributed any of this anywhere else? The materials?
So one of the things that we wanted to do was there's a couple of events coming up in the community, at least on our end, as invested community members, set up tabling so that people who are of our community in Brownsville can know how to apply, right? Like one of the things that we talked about when meeting with the assistant city manager was this has never been done before for our community. It's actually very radical, and so it's exciting, right? And so, but the deficiency in that is that our community has never seen itself represented in city work. And so this is something that is breaking barriers. And so to think about, like, you know, we want to make sure that people have access to this and that they can apply if they want to, and that people are considered based on their values and the work that they've been doing in the community.
Thanks.
Yeah.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Though. Has anyone discussed about forming the mission of the group? So that, I mean, y'all have been involved since the beginning, and because of you, the commission has been, or task force has been created. So I would think now would be the opportunity or the best time to delineate what you want to accomplish.
I think one of the things that I've learned as a leader in this community has been to learn when to take a step back. And I think no, but I mean it in the sense of, you know, my role is to support the community in having this happen. Like, I haven't made any of these decisions just by myself as a person. It's been constant conversation, messaging, reaching out to folks, because ultimately it's not me, it's all of us. And so
When we met with the assistant city manager, we said that would be something possibly that we did once
Right.
people were. Yeah.
Right. That's when it would typically be done.
So you think that once this task force is assembled, that they'll still be all-inclusive and welcome people's input?
we would hope so.
Yeah,
We would hope
that would,
I mean,
that would be the point. It's up to us to appoint
yeah.
those members.
Okay.
And that's why we wanted to do this presentation, right? So that there's an understanding of the mentality and the work that we want people to have an understanding of, because these are the issues that are impacting people on a day-to-day basis here. And so ultimately it's about, I mean, we want to do it the right way, essentially is what it is. And we want to do it in a way that is inclusive of everybody from the beginning to when it manifests into an official group that is appointed.
So one of the things that you might want to consider, or you probably have already, is working with COBTV to develop this into a little program that can be aired on COBTV, not only for information and education, but also to advocate for folks to apply.
Yeah, definitely.
For that.
No, we want to, that's a good, we'll take that as the note. We made other specific recommendations to the city manager's office about the application itself. I didn't include those on here. Basically, spaces for people to self-identify gender and pronouns, because the application is pretty standard. And so there are just some things on there that wouldn't fit the needs of our community. And so we forwarded those to the city manager's office and to the mayor. If that is something the commissioners would like, I can share those as well.
I think that would be a good idea, based on what I saw.
Yeah, and that has more information, detailed resources and citations, and we did all the work.
All right.
Yeah, we already have, so there's a draft version of that application. In fact, Isela was just sharing that with me. So it's being digitized at this time. So we're already working on some of these pieces for what the commission will need to ultimately appoint the task force as the group is suggesting. So we're making some of those tweaks.
Okay. Thanks.
Any other questions? Thank you guys so much.
Yes, thank you.
Next, we have the work session for Planning and Redevelopment Department Pillar Update.
Good evening, Mayor and Commission. I have hard copies if anybody is interested in a hard copy in the presentation.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
So I'm here tonight to share with you some observations from the past 100 days or so that I've been on staff through the lens of your commission pillars and our annual work plan. And I provided you a copy of that on the first page just to share with you for information purposes. The next slide is identification of the land development services core services, the services we provide on a daily basis to the land development community, zoning case management, subdivision, platting and replatting, building permitting, construction inspections, construction code enforcement, historic preservation, board and commission coordination. We coordinate P&Z, Board of Adjustments, and the Building Board of Adjustments. We're involved in TERS creation, and we'll be involved in the downtown TERS administration. Retail redevelopment, Constanza Minor is leading that effort. She's done a great job of creating a new section within the planning department, assisting with retail redevelopment of existing buildings, as well as working as an ombudsman with developers across the city outside of the historic area, and facilitating the land development process, as well as doing some marketing across the state and the country. So she's doing a great job for the department. We also are involved in the code development process, both the current UDC, but ongoing rewrite to existing code, and we also coordinate the Main Street program. So the Land Development Department's environment has three major areas that we took a look at: our people, our process, and our systems. Our people are made up of skilled employees, some that have backgrounds in architecture, engineering, and public administration, a few in planning. We are focused on hiring folks that actually have been trained in the field of land development and urban planning. Most recently, our most recent hire is a local graduate who left Brownsville, went to Texas A&M, and earned his bachelor's degree in urban planning and land development. He was employed immediately by the city of McAllen and then moved to the city of Harlingen, and we're lucky to have been able to recruit him here to Brownsville. So I think he'll have a long and prosperous career with the city. Also, ongoing training for our employees to make sure that as land development trends change, that we're trained how to deal with those changes, as well as software and legal issues arise. Culture is a big part of how we provide excellent customer service within the planning department. It's about understanding the role of the development process and how it adds tax base to the community and generates new taxes without the commission having to raise the tax rate. Growth is an important part of our budgeting process, and the planning department is critical in creating that new land value that's out in the community. Attitude's the other thing, understanding our role not just as regulator, but as facilitator and economic developer. Many planning departments fall into the trap of being heavy-handed regulators. The reality is we should be facilitators, understanding that we are competing with other communities for capital investment dollars, and it's important that we keep those dollars here in Brownsville, in this part of the valley. The second area is process, and thanks again to the Commission for funding the UDC rewrite. I can't tell you how many times the UDC causes impediments to the land development process. Even today, in one of our pre-development meetings with Valley Night and Day Clinic, they're desiring to make a significant investment on Alton Glore. We're in the building and construction plan review process, and we discovered that there's a 10,000 square foot limitation on buildings on those properties on Alton Glore. Doesn't make a lot of sense. We should be limited by the site and the design requirements of the site, the parking, the landscaping, and not on building size. And so that's one of the things that we'll see corrected in the UDC, right? So we really appreciate the opportunity to work with our consultant and to create a new code for the community. We think it'll pay long-term dividends. The other thing is to make sure that our ordinances, our building codes are consistent with state and federal law. They should be updated every 2 years when the legislature meets. They're changing the game in the land development arena and what the city can and can't do. And we haven't done a great job of updating biannually. We need to do that. The next major area is a land development information management system. Unfortunately, right now, our land development information system is basically manila folders and paper. We're stuck in a 30, 40, 50-year-old records management system in the planning department. And so we are starting internal discussions on what the land development information management system should look like. It's not only the planning department, but it touches public works, engineering, fire department, PUB, the county, and the drainage district. So it'll be a complex information management system, but one that requires coordination and planning, and we'll be continuing to work on that ongoing plan. Zoning case management. We don't have a zoning case automated system. We don't have a system to manage our subdivision plats. And these are all different land management systems. There's not a one-size-fits-all and solves all your problems. What I've seen in some cities is they'll bite off one part of the automation process, like building permitting or zoning and subdivision, and your development community still ends up frustrated because you haven't comprehensively solved the land development automation process. And so we're going to take a close look at how we roll out that land development information management system. Same thing with our building plan and review and permit inspections management. Our current process requires developers to come to the city, to go to PUB, to go to engineering in person and facilitate the movement of information. That just shouldn't happen today. We have the technology and the ability to move development information through different departments and back and forth to private developers to facilitate the land development process. And so we'll be bringing back the commission plan at some point in the future. Same thing with code compliance, case management. We don't currently have a system available for that. And then the other smaller permitting issues are certificate of occupancy, plumbing, electrical, roofing, fencing, and windstorm. Those have not been automated as well. And so we're going to create a comprehensive plan for automating the development process. So the challenges the department faces, and we've already taken a giant step in addressing the outdated subdivision and zoning codes, including our historic ordinance. Our building codes conflict with some of our historic structures in how we manage the redevelopment of our historic structures. The building permit process is onerous on the private sector side and how we go about requiring the sharing and the review of information and comments back to the builders. The same thing happens on our inspection side of the building process. Zoning case management is still a paper process for the most part. The zoning ordinance implementation, because we are working with an outdated code with a lot of conflicts in the language, it's a challenge to make interpretations, so we have to work diligently to make sure that we are facilitating the development process and not becoming an obstacle. Same thing with our subdivision ordinance. We don't have ongoing staff training in land development law and subdivision regulations and urban design, and that's something that we're going to be implementing on an ongoing basis in the department. I've also already spoke about the information management systems. We are making strides in the area of hardware, but hardware is not really the challenge that it used to be in automating land development. The hardware's really come down in affordability. It's really the software and the licensing for land management information systems where our greatest cost will be. There's inconsistent, because of the earlier lack of staff training, we sometimes have inconsistent or incorrect application of the existing codes, so we'll be working on training, internal training to eliminate that. And all the denials now in the department are coming to my office so we can review with the either the building official or the planning manager to make sure that we're making consistent and transparent decisions in the land development process. Our historic preservation program is fairly limited in its scope to regulatory focus. Visited with our HPO about trying to be more proactive and figuring out how we can facilitate more historic preservation activities, either through nonprofit organizations or other groups to assist us. And then again, just ongoing reinforcement of our customer service orientation to the land development and real estate community. So things we've done now is we're filling our vacancies with staff trained in land development regulatory processes and systems, modifying our culture, moving from a regulator perspective to an economic development or project facilitator perspective. Focus our existing staff, the full-time equivalents we have within our budget, to be participating in the approval of land development processes. And we're outreaching to the local realtors and developers to champion contemporary codes, systems, and experienced staff. Again, the project log jams end up in my office, and we try to find a way to clear the path. And also, we need to implement a retention strategy for experienced plan reviewers and inspectors and development planners, because once they have that experience here, the other cities are ready to steal them away. So we want to make sure that we're competitive salary-wise in the marketplace, and we're able to hold on to the people that we're training. Over the short term and now to 12 months, we've used some of our design professionals to create a system when land use conflicts arise between developers and neighborhoods. We can simulate the development and try and provide as much information so neighborhoods are making good decisions, whether they're in favor or opposed, to try to facilitate those development projects. We use CAD and SketchUp capabilities now at the operational level, which helps us out. We're laying the groundwork for a design studio as the city adopts its form-based code. We're shifting really from a land use regulation framework where we decide whether something can happen based on the use to whether something can happen based on the urban form and the style. And so it's a different way of looking at development. So we want to make sure we have design-oriented staff that understand those concepts and are able to use the code to achieve a better design outcome for the community. Our HPO is 1 FTE. That's a big challenge to manage the code and manage all the projects and build a robust program. So we're gonna in the short run, we're gonna use our downtown coordinator to help with historic preservation so we can maximize the use of our FTEs that we have currently on board. We're going to have a TERS board coordinator, someone that's responsible for preparing agendas, conducting meetings, working with the board to develop final project plans and project implementation as well. Continuing to work on our customer service culture. We will be bringing the commission revised parking regulations. We're not going to wait for the code to come to us in November, December. We're having some trouble on our building permitting side because of our fairly black and white parking regulations. And so we've created some systems that can give us a little more flexibility in looking at things like on-street parking or shared parking or night and day, AM, PM, peak period parking as a way to get around just whether or not you meet the required parking or not, and then your project's not allowed to move forward. The Planning Commission reviewed that proposal and is recommending approval. That'll be coming to you in March for your review. We've performed a review of our windstorm administrative procedures and found that we were being a little aggressive in some areas, so we're trimming some of that back in order to facilitate some of the cost impact on a local community for windstorm regulations. Some of that's going to require legislative relief, and we'll put that into the 2021 legislative agenda to try to see if we can find some relief from the state. We have cases where the windstorm requirements are requiring property owners to hire consulting engineers, and in some cases, the consulting engineers' cost is more than the project. And so there's just something wrong with the program that we need to address at the state level, and we'll work on that. Mid-range strategies in the next 12 to 24 months. We hope to adopt the UDC, design and implement a developer university concept. We're able to work with our developers and our builders in bringing them and educate them on a quarterly basis of any code amendments or building code updates. And this way we're all on the same page as to what the regulations mean and how they're implemented and how they're administered within in the department. We'll have a development process automation group working between us, IT, the various departments that are involved in the review process as we work towards a automation plan. Again, we'll have an annual training and service development services training plan for the department. We're going to have to train on the new type of code that's we anticipate. It'll have many different tools that we're not used to here with the current zoning ordinance, so there'll be a significant training and implementation training as well. The new code is going to require a new zoning map, and that's something we need to navigate and figure out how we're going to get from here to there, but the new code will have a different looking map than the current one we currently administer. And I already mentioned the design studio. Longer term for the department, a full, robust, built-out digital land development system, so people are able to do things online, so people are able to submit documents online. They don't have to come down to the office. We'll be able to share comments two-way, and hopefully developers will be able to look online and see the stage of their approval, and if there's bottlenecks, they can call and resolve those bottlenecks rather than just waiting for those things to happen and become conflicts. We don't really have a long-range planning division. We're pretty focused on the current planning processes, and so in the future, we can talk about having a long-range planning division, somebody that's looking and thinking 10, 20, and 50 years out. We also may consider a neighborhood planning division, somebody to work with our neighborhoods to put in place plans for long-term stability and sustainability of our neighborhoods, and someone that will work with those neighborhood groups to create neighborhood improvement plans and sector plans. We'll work to create a volunteer corps to support municipal provided services. Placemaking is underway in many communities across the state and the country. We don't have that type of division, somebody that's looking at the quality of the community from not just an aesthetics point of view, but functionally and sustainability. We don't have that, but that's certainly something we could talk to the commission about over the next few years, is a need to add a placemaking division. A lot of neighborhood empowerment, possibly an annual neighborhood academy and summit, neighborhood vitality grants where there's some grant funding available to fix up the fences that have been installed and now they're falling apart and they're falling over. Same thing with the access ways into the subdivisions where the entryways are falling down and the neighborhood may not have the financial ability to pull that off. To revitalize it, we might step in with either a grant or some matching type of funds. And then community gardens and the reuse of some of the vacant lots in the community. Just quickly on historic preservation in downtown and how we would make a more robust historic preservation office. Currently, our staff is managing the 011 ordinance. We're going to talk a little bit about that later tonight. Some potential programs or new historic districts providing technical assistance for federal and state tax credits, facade easements, fire and ADA compliance grants. This is still an issue that we're going to need to address to resolve some of the conflicts between our goals to revitalize downtown and at the same time do it in a safe manner. Some project management, historic building stabilization. We still have a lot of buildings that are at risk that could lose if they're not properly maintained with either a roof, paint jobs, those type of things. That's something that we could explore, as well as historic structure bank, to make sure we're taking care of those structures that perhaps people don't want on their property anymore. We'd move them to a location where we could store and maintain those properties. And then working with our nonprofit organizations to build capacity. We can't achieve historic preservation with just city funding. It has to come from foundation and fundraising, private sector, and so we need to help nonprofits achieve a greater level of participation in the preservation of historic structures. Possible nonprofit programs that we can work with is an architectural salvage. I know there's been some preliminary discussion about partnering with TSC. Roof and foundation grants are a fairly popular tool to save your historic structure inventory. Ongoing fundraising, paint grants, putting together a volunteer corps that participates in preserving historic structures, and then repurposing of some of our historic buildings. There'll be TERS funding eligible activities. Historic preservation is a CDBG and a home funded eligible activity, and those structures could be used for things like senior activity centers or homeless housing, senior housing, affordable housing, or even a makerspace. So looking at broader of a downtown activation framework with some of the gaps, and this is 10, 15, 20, 30 years out. If you look at some of the other cities that have been involved in historic preservation now, they've been at it 50 and 100 years. So we're kind of building up capacity as we talk about making historic preservation one of the community's priorities, possibly creating a downtown community development corporation, having a downtown district manager, a downtown plan, working on a parking supply and demand analysis, coordinating the downtown TERS, facilitating public-private partnerships, possibly creating a small business fund. Special events management is something that we've kind of done in an ad hoc manner. We're probably going to, if we're going to have more of these special events to drive downtown development, then there probably needs to be some dedicated capacity to special events management. And same thing with fundraising and advocacy for historic preservation in downtown. Streetscape maintenance and operation strategy, a downtown security plan, and downtown ambassadors and urban design services for downtown. This is kind of a kitchen sink thing of the things that I've encountered in the last 90 days. It's all over the place, from zoning to building permits, fences, and just about everything. Just wanted to share with you some of the things that have been challenging over the last 90 days, but we think we're making some headway in the department. With that, I'll be glad to answer any questions.
I have a few.
Sir.
So how long have you been here? About 90 days? Or
about 100 days now, I guess.
And so you're well aware, I'm sure, that the biggest complaint we get from the public is the nightmare that the developers, everyone from small businesses to large developers have, which is why we went to get the consultants for the UDC. You're also aware, I'm sure, that there's a momentum going right now, and that we need to accommodate that momentum or it'll die out like it's already done before.
Sure.
Around 2011, 2012, there was some momentum that died out. So I know it's not your fault because you just got on, but I'm looking here and it's saying that by June 1st of 2022, which is like 2.5 years, and there's already been a year that Mr. Bernal's been on board, that you hope to implement the departmental culture that you're going through to where they'll be able to accommodate people and facilitate rather than stop and hinder development. So is that 2.5 years we have to wait before these developers get to come in and make it easy for them? Or?
No, absolutely not. I think we've already started that process. There's areas in the code
okay, well, that
where
brings
I'm
me to
comfortable
okay.
providing some discretion.
So, remember, I was trying to gain support to repeal these codes because we didn't want to have to wait 1.5 years or 2 years. And then y'all started talking about the pink zone. It's been months since that was brought up. I asked you today, I saw you at lunch.
Yep.
There's no movement, and there's people, for example, like the restaurant on Washington Terrace that wanted to open in December. They could have had the whole holiday season. They could be open for Charo days, and they wanted to get some special lights because of some conflict. And we also know from your experts that our codes are the worst they've ever seen anywhere, from what they were saying to us, right?
Sure.
And there's no accommodation still. All there is talk and plans about what we're going to do in 2.5 years. And that's not right. So we don't want to wait 2.5 years. We need to get this going. He's been on a year already. And I have heard there are some improvements, and I hate to be taking it out on you, like I said,
Sure.
okay? But this is not acceptable, and it needs to go faster, okay? And for example, you're saying that short-term strategy, modify culture. Short-term, now to 12 months, build customer service. You're talking about the UDC, it says here by October 2020 that you're going to develop and implement the Unified Development Code. But I'm hearing over here on this other side that it's in the 1 to 2 year plan to implement. And then you got to have training first and then implement. So we don't really have time. So I'm going to ask my fellow commissioners to consider repealing these codes, and then we'll see how fast you can do it. Because if you don't have any codes, then they're not going to be hindered by us, which we've been doing already for years. And like I say, I'm sorry to take it out on you. They sent you up here, right? So I think there needs to be some kind of quick fix on this to get these things going. Those guys can't open up because of some lights. The Main Street Deli, which I see is on your 90-day deal, finally got to get approved. They got approved, it could have been months ago. They're losing money. These people are small businesses investing thousands in the community, and they got to pay rent for months before they can even get a CO, and this is wrong. And we've already been very patient, waiting for all your codes and your consultants and everything else, and it's time to get moving, okay? So that's where I'm coming from. Okay, I just want to let my thoughts be known so the public knows that we're not standing for this, okay?
And I would, when we approved the UDC rewrite and the funding for this, we discussed this being a 12-month process. So that's still what we're going to hold. I'm definitely going to hold you to that. And then on the culture, I would agree with what Commissioner Neese is saying. That's not a 2022 thing. That should be a 90 days thing. Changing the culture and facilitating and kind of changing the mindset as to what everybody's here to do, I think should be something that should be done within the next 90 days. I can't imagine that somebody wouldn't understand what their purpose is as a city employee when they're trying to facilitate business. Because you're doing it, for example, right there where it says expedite Black Bear Diner permitting. I think that should be the same across the board. Everything should be expedited, and you should really make an effort to facilitate as much as possible. Also on the digital, I think that should be also ASAP kind of thing, 12 to 24, not a 5-year. You had it on the 5-year. That should at the very worst be mid, 12 to 24. And then there was a mention of historic preservation, working with TSC. BCIC actually, and Ben, you should know this, one of the last BCIC meetings, there was some funding that was requested to match a grant from the Meadows Foundation to coordinate a historic preservation program with TSC and the Historical Association. So I think that's moving along. So if you didn't know about it, please check on that.
Go ahead.
No, it's okay, finish.
Okay, so under the 12 to 24 months, it says UDC adoption and conformity to local government code, Texas local government code. So when Mr. Bernal hired his consultants to redo the code, they said they didn't need any lawyers, even though they're doing our codes, okay, which include penal provisions, constitutional issues, all these other things. So they said they didn't need any lawyers. Who is going to do that conformity and adoption and conform it to the local government code?
Well, it should be our consultant in the draft. They'd bring it in conformity with Chapter 211 and Chapter 212
They're not
of the
lawyers.
Texas Local Government
There's no
Code.
lawyers involved in that process.
We'll also be reviewing that, and so.
The planning department?
Planning department. I mean,
Okay, but are y'all lawyers?
No,
Remember,
sir.
we're talking about laws. They're not lawyers, and they're telling us what laws to pass.
Right.
So my concern is that we're going to take another year for the lawyers to look at that to make sure it's in conformity, and if it's not, then it's going to delay it even more to get it in conformity, and then we have to pay our consultants more money to get it back in conformity. So they should have the lawyers involved right now. I don't know if Mr. DeCoste or some other lawyer should be working with them on this.
There's some rather basic provisions in the Texas Local Government Code in the subdivision platting statute that should be in our code today, and for some reason they're not. I don't think that the consultant will hire an attorney to do that, because it's pretty standard boilerplate language in most municipalities' development codes. And so I think we're going to see that similar language in the new draft.
Some of these codes have penal provisions.
Sure.
They have other issues that affect the constitutionality, takings, what they're doing as far as other people's property, keeping them from making money off their own property. So I'm just going to suggest that you get a lawyer now before you have to wait and tap it on at the end and wait more time.
I have some questions. So your first slide was the spreadsheet with the different colors on that.
Yes.
I don't like those slides because not everyone is able to color within the lines, just like not everyone is able to color outside the lines. I find that when the format is like that, and it's not your design, it's organized, but it also advocates for people to stay within the lines. And there are a lot of things that happen in the planning department where you can't stay within the lines. Otherwise, you're not going to develop great customer service and culture and efficiency and so on and so forth. So I want to make sure that you don't stay within those lines ever, so to speak, because that's not providing the customer service and the efficiency that we need. As a physician, anytime that I talk to a patient to explain a problem or consent them for surgery, I'm required to speak to them at a 4th grade reading level, because health disparities and education levels are so broad, and I have to be able to say whatever I'm going to say in English and in Spanish in our community. Recently, I asked a question about a certificate that I need personally, and the answer went way over my head. And if I'm educated and couldn't understand even a sentence of what was said, I am concerned about that customer service from that standpoint as well. Whatever you're going to explain to someone who picks up the phone to call you, whether they're a developer or just a regular person like me, that customer service needs to be in 4th grade reading level, quite honestly. My third thing is the West Rail Corridor is really going to come alive very shortly. And thankfully, we have a lot of forward momentum to accomplish the trail and the road with the trail, even within the year. So I've asked before that you take an extra special fast look at the zoning and the ordinances and so on and so forth for that area, because we don't want to make a mistake in an area that's going to be highly sought after, and all eyes will be on that area because of the contention of the corridor for 10 years now. You mentioned developing an educational program for developers, which I think is excellent. And I would encourage you to include with that periodic maybe site visits that are not within Brownsville. Maybe once every year or 2 years you take a few developers, and they can share the cost, or get a grant from BCIC or something to an off-site location of some ordinance or some design feature that you're trying to promote, because a lot of us get very busy in what we're doing and we don't necessarily travel, or when we travel we're not looking at those types of things, we're looking at other things. And it was very successful a few years ago when some of our staff and I took the developers to San Antonio to look at walkability and bikeability and such as it applied to the West Rail Corridor. And they thanked us for it, and I believe the staff learned from that experience as well, and it wasn't very expensive. At that time, we had a grant from the Methodist Health Ministries that covered the gas and the meals that we had for those 36 hours. And then finally, park fees. As you go through the UDC, I'm assuming it changes. I'm assuming that we're looking at, I don't know exactly what you call it, but when a developer has to put money in the pot for park compensation or remediation, is that up to snuff? Should it be different? Should there be changes made? I don't know if that's included in the UDC design, but I think that's very important.
Okay.
So Mayor and Commission, if I may, now, the feedback is appreciated. That's part of why Rick deviated from the 5 to 7 minute typical work session timeframe. He shared a mouthful. Now, whether it's me telling you or Helen telling you or Rick, you know, a lot of this stuff is just very technical and it takes time. And because of how things have fallen behind here, some of these things are just what they are. And I would argue that the consultants are going to help expedite things, because if we did it on our own, based on our own resources, it's almost virtually impossible. It will be a very long endeavor because it's very technical in nature. That's just, you know, ask whomever, whatever other community has gone through what we're going to take on. We can modify this, and that's part of why we want the feedback to know what we need to be moving quicker on. And then there's a lot of other funding considerations that are tied to some of these softwares, for example. But we're up to the challenge of planning this front and center to the majority of what we're doing at the city. It's just, this is a significant amount of things that have to be done, and we need to just kind of pace ourselves, prioritize, and do what we can. But that is our focus. Our focus is to be successful in accomplishing a lot of what's in here, coupling that with your feedback. It's just, these things are what they are in terms of the process that it takes to get them in place.
Right, and in our role, Mr. Bernal, also we're the fresh pair of eyes. We're the first set of eyes that gets to look at this, hear the presentation, tell you kind of what the pulse of the community is, what we're hearing and seeing, and we expect our feedback to be taken seriously.
Absolutely.
And I'll respond and kind of in defense to Rick here, that he got stuck with a consultant you chose that you didn't even go out for bids for. Okay, so you brought these consultants in at $500,000, and that money could have been spent maybe better if we would have had at least some other choices. So these guys telling us that it's going to take 1.5 years to do this, you know, and then him getting stuck, he didn't even have a choice.
He did have knowledge through the interviewing process. He was made aware.
Okay,
and he actually had worked with this firm
meeting,
before.
I asked you during the meeting, I said, you haven't even picked a director yet, and you're going to force this on him, and you didn't mention that then.
Well, he was aware through the interview process, and he also had shared his vote of confidence for having worked with him before.
You picked him the very next day.
Well, we were interviewing, in fact, weeks when that decision was also being made, so it was being communicated to him so that he wouldn't inherit something that would make it a challenge for him, so he can actually attest to that himself.
Well, I guess I thought that it was still an open process when we discussed it during that meeting, and we didn't know who it was yet, because you didn't mention it at that point, that you already had something. The very next day, and I'm not complaining about your selection, okay?
No,
I'm just going
Rick
back
was made
and
aware.
recapping what happened.
Right.
Okay? And now you're claiming it's too complicated. Well, maybe you picked the wrong consultants, is what I'm saying.
No, they're qualified. What I'm saying is the work is highly technical. So typically, which is why you bring in specialized consultants to assist with that work and to streamline the work.
To take
because
a year
they
and a
basically
half
supplement
and lose
staff.
the momentum that we have going downtown. That's the point. We've already lost momentum before. You weren't here. You don't know what happened. We've lost momentum. We don't want to lose it again, okay,
Sure.
by having to wait 2 years to get our culture changed or to get these guys on track with what they need to do.
Rick, in the meantime, what he's highlighting here is what are the short-term strategies that he's implemented that are paralleling the code rewrite to make sure that we are streamlining in light of the outdated codes while the new ones are being tweaked.
So you can't parallel something if you don't know what it is.
Well, there's some short-term wins that you're.
We're not going to wait for the consultant to finish his work product to remove impediments from the development process.
Okay.
We're bringing you the parking ordinance is a good example. Right now, the code says you must have 20 spaces or else you're not allowed to move forward. Okay. We're bringing you
what about the
revisions
pink
that allow
zone?
us,
When
give
is
us
that
more
going to happen? Or
subjectivity.
is that going to happen at the end and implemented?
That's being done within this process. I think you all saw the first
Time
draft
frame?
of that.
Time frame?
By, what's the deadline, September? The pink zone, the pink zone. That's already.
August for the pink zone? So why even have it then? Remember, the pink zone is the less red tape zone. So it's easier for us to repeal those codes so you don't have, no one has any hassles and they can go build their little stores or their developments, and then y'all will move faster, I guarantee it.
Mr. Vasquez, what I'm hearing is just move as quickly as
Yes, sir.
you possibly can and make sure that the culture is understanding of the development community and the commission's desire to continue to facilitate opening businesses and everything else like that.
Yes, sir.
I just have a quick comment to add up to this conversation. I think it's really important to add metrics to track the progress that we're doing in this department, especially in regards to permitting, inspections, platting, the platting process, to see how long things are taking. And when you guys come and present, we can see, the last quarter stats, and then we're able to see the progress, rather than just saying, yeah, it's getting better. You can actually see it's getting better. So I think that's really important.
Just remember, while you guys are taking your time, we're catching heat out there. We're the ones catching heat.
Well, I'll bring up an example. You mentioned, you put up on the previous slide the Calacas Tacos. They came to me shortly after we were elected, and it's not even in my district, but they went into a project that was already 90% full. Or they basically bought into someone else's business that was very close to getting their occupancy permit.
Correct.
And for some reason, this would have been in the fall. They're still not open. I don't know what's happened. Why? If you buy into a business that's almost there, why is it still taking too long? And even then, it's not, at least it's not just discriminating against the public, because just think about with George Ramirez's building, the performing arts building. How long has it taken it to open? It still doesn't have an occupancy permit. So, and I can't understand that one.
Sure.
But just to add something different to the conversation, in what you've been focusing on, two things that I think would fall under your jurisdiction that I would like to know more about. I would like to see more focus on affordable housing. I think it would fall under your jurisdiction, so if we could maybe add that into your area of expertise and put it into your timelines. And then also, for example, for today, the agenda items 11, 12, and 13 regarding applications to the Texas Department of Housing and Community Affairs, I think we need explanation and maybe changing the rules on that too. Okay. And the sooner the better, because we'll probably have to be making decisions related to that in the near future, including tonight. That's it.
Right, and just to speak to the Performing Arts Academy, we are working with legal. We've had some issues with the design and the contractor, that they're each blaming each other, but we're awaiting, we're already entering performance bond and bonding to find a resolution. So that's something the performance bond company has not responded in time, but we've had to go that route, unfortunately. But we have had to include legal because the HR, it's the blame game. Even speaking with our Director of Engineering and Public Works, he's never seen it in the history of his 30-year career. But they finally did respond, the bond company, and we are moving forward with that.
Thank you.
Do we have any HUD issues at this point? HUD was on our rear end.
No, we do not have those HUD issues. We were making sure that they are aware of everything that's happening. We do have a certificate of occupancy for that building. We've had that since, I would say, end of November, beginning of December. ROCA is able to safely occupy that building, and we've told them, go ahead and do it. I've encouraged them, and they, they're listening. We've encouraged everyone to use that.
For the
CFO is there. For the whole building.
For the whole building?
CFO is there. There are no issues with the elevator, it has its clear certificate of occupancy.
Did the mirrors get?
It's the mirrors that we're fighting, that we're disputing, and the facade, something with the facade. So there's two issues there, but in terms of safely occupying the building, yes, they can do that. And when they've been notified since December that they can do that.
Thank you. Ms. Vasquez, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate your work.
Thank you, Mr. Vasquez.
Yeah, sorry. Sorry to be Debbie Downers.
Next, we have consent agenda items.
I'll move to approve, except I'd like to pull out E for discussion.
B?
E as in elephant?
We have a motion to approve with the exception of item E. Do I have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Motion passes. Okay, item E. This is,
about the asphalt.
sure?
Consent agenda item, letter E. Consideration action to award a term contract for the one-year renewal contract for the purchase and delivery of asphalt, oils, and emulsions for the city of Brownsville as per fiscal year 2020 approved budget.
Good afternoon, Mayor Commissioners. This item is for oils, emulsions for asphalt binder. They use it for our potholes and for crack sealing. This is a one-year extension of this contract.
Okay, and maybe you're not the right person to ask, but I have 3 questions that I wrote. One, you all asked for a quote for patching mix and no bid were submitted, so then what do you do when no one submits a bid? I assume you're still gonna need the patching mix.
I just don't know what contract that was for.
Okay, well, it's part of the documentation that was provided as supplement, but okay, we'll move on. The second one, you described it as a renewal of an existing contract, but it's new prices, and y'all mentioned this in the previous meeting too. I just don't understand how we have multiple year contracts, but then you're renegotiating the terms at every year. So then what's the purpose of having a contract?
Well, based on the product that it is, they have the option to renegotiate the price depending on the market. And they have to submit the backup to show that according to the market, the actual product has increased based on the data that is provided by, what's the name of the company you get the data from?
Good evening, Commissioner. In regards to your question, some of the term contracts that we have, they stipulate that on a renewal, if there's a price increase, because in this case of petroleum-based products, which is the oil that they handle, they have the right to come to the city and request an increase, a percentage. Sometimes they use CPI prices, and sometimes they also use increases that they have on the raw material that they use. So in this case, even though we have a term contract, but also the contract says that it needs to be mutually approved by the city and the vendor. So what they did is they came back saying they wanted to renew, but they had a few items that they needed to raise because of the inflation and also because of the materials that went up.
Sure, but if I understand correctly, you're going out for bids again from different entities, so why enter into a multiple year, you see? Because if enter into a multiple year contract, if you're gonna go out for bids every year, then to do the price comparison, then why do you enter into a multiple year contract? And maybe this is more of a legal question.
Well, let me see if I understand this. What's happening is you enter into a multi-year contract.
Correct.
And then the renewal has to be mutual. So if the company says, no, we're not going to renew, we want to renegotiate these prices, from what I'm seeing here, you put it back out for bid? Did you put those prices back out for bid?
No, sir. What happened was when we submitted the letter to them to see if they were willing to renew for an extension again, they say that they will like to renew the contract, but they had some increases to some of the items that they have. Therefore, they submitted all the paperwork for the city to consider if it was proper for us to maintain or to renew with the increases or to go out for bids.
Okay.
In this case, after reviewing the material that they submitted, we decided that it was the increase that they requested for. It was we got all the documentation for it.
Okay, but when the price changes, it sounds to me like the contract changes. So at that point, I don't know if you need to rebid it or what, or if there's a certain percentage that they can increase prices within the contract itself. But if they're wanting to renegotiate prices and set different prices, that sounds to me like a different contract and it's something that should be bid out. That sounds, I mean, that's what I'm hearing, but I don't know what legal thinks about that.
Well, it gives the city the option. If the price is a price that the city does not believe that engaging in such contract would be in the best interest of the city can always just terminate the contract at that time and bid out. So that's something that...
Right, but it's a different price. So in that case, then if you're entering into a multi-year contract, the company then can say, well, I want to renegotiate, and the city decides whether the price is fair or not. That doesn't sound right.
Well, if the city doesn't approve the increase, and that is strictly within the realm of the commission, then basically the contract will terminate at that time and you could go off.
But I can understand the city agreeing or determining whether the increase is something they'll accept if that increase, if the parameters of the increase are within the contract itself. If they're not within the let's say the contract allows for a 10% variance and it's within a 10% variance, fine. But if not, if it varies from the terms of the contract, then I think that's a renegotiation that should possibly go back out.
Or I think it makes it inefficient because, for example, the price quotes that are here are only valid until the end of January, and we're voting on it now in mid to late February. So then there's a delay. If we don't agree it, then you have to put it out for bids. So then what happens then in the meantime, if you have to go out for bids because we didn't approve this new increase?
Well, if the price change that got approved by the commission is something that on the other side they're willing to accept, and the contract goes on. If they don't, no one can force the city to contract or approve their change to the price, just like they can't be forced to approve a no from this commission or perhaps a rejection of the price or an acceptance of a price that has already been outdated. What I'm trying to tell the commission is that that's built in. I think the only thing this saves is you've been having to procure again. This is a bid that was made by a reputable company. The price was one that the commission approved at some point. This is just the nature of certain items when negotiating with certain items such as petroleum-based. Normally parties are very hesitant to enter into long-term relationships because the price varies so much. So that is my understanding, and that's been my experience with items of this nature. However, should the price be one that is not palatable to this commission, the commission can always pull out and say, this price change is not acceptable, and that allows the city to rebid the contract and proceed fresh with someone else.
Well, if the price is variable and it fluctuates a lot and the city knows that already, then you shouldn't be entering into multi-year contracts for this type of service.
Well, that is, I don't get to choose the contracts that come to my office. You know, they bring contracts that the city enters into, and I check them for legality and form. I mean, I can't make those decisions for the city. If they believe contract A, B, and C is best for the city, that's something management and the specific end-using departments would determine. That's not a legal issue. I just get to determine whether the contract is legal. And if it is legal and it's not missing anything or has any deficiencies, you know, nothing precludes two people from entering into a bad contract.
So you're just a messenger?
Well, I'm just a legal representative, and I can advise as to the contract, the form and its legality, but the substance of it, it's up to the end-using department and the city department.
So Mayor Commission, it is a purchasing technique that streamlines purchasing. It's typically unique for commodity type products. Another technique the city has also used, we don't use that here, but in fact I was asked that question recently, is bulk purchasing. So bulk purchasing, for example, when cities buy chemicals, when they buy all these different types of supplies, they typically employ different techniques that in the procurement world are used to help get economies of scale, create efficiencies. There are times where the pricing is stable and you don't have to come back to the commission. It's all administrative. It happens behind the scenes. The pricing's stable. You can plan budgets better on a multi-year basis versus every time you budget, you're trying to stabilize and streamline and standardize a lot of the supplies and maintenance budgets that can shift so much. So these term contracts are also helpful because if you can lock in good pricing when the market's not doing its things, then you can have a pretty good long-term budget. It's hard to do a 5-year forecast, for example, if you have a lot of shifts in line item pricing. So those are some of the techniques, not that you can always change it, but there are a variety of tactics that in the purchasing world are typically used for some type of benefit, whether it's a savings measure, an efficiency, things of that sort. So this is just one that we have used in Brownsville a lot for different services.
I understand that, and your point is that if the price, the price fluctuations are what makes it easier for us to determine budgets, but from what's happening here, if there's a price fluctuation, the other company's saying, hey, let's renegotiate, so that goes counter to budget.
Because of the market condition, it appears that way. When you have times of more stability, it typically works in its intended purpose. When you don't have, like for example, right now that the oil is doing its thing, a barrel is at $70, for example, you're going to see this. If the pricing was suppressed, you wouldn't have as much fluctuation. So the term contract works as designed. In this particular instance, it defeats the purpose of having a term contract sometimes because you don't get that efficiency of standardizing your procurement. So I agree, but it's just a matter of the market. You're trying to find the best way to approach purchasing the certain products.
That commodity is usually in flux, petroleum.
Mm-hmm. And I think the reason I pulled this one out is because I've noticed that lately there's some things that we vote on. One that the contract already expired, and so we're doing late. And like PUB was my training ground, so they plan months ahead. Okay, we know that this contract's going to go is going to end, say December 31st. So come October, we're already voting on it, and then that way you know the price. If you can lock in the price for multiple years, that's great. But if it's going to be variable, or like you said, within a 10% range, that's normal. But if it's not, then why not just put it out for bids then every summer, and then you vote on it in October, and it takes effect in January.
Most of the contracts, we try to set up the CPI, not to exceed the 5%. In this case, it was because, number one, because it was a renewal. Number two, because of the fluctuation in the petroleum-based products. And also because of the few vendors that we have. Also, to what city manager was saying, we're buying in bulk, where if we were to get quotes every time we do a purchase, because of the procurement policies that we have, we will have to bring it back, so often, because when we do purchases of up $35,000, then we will have to bring it back to City Commission. So it's not efficient having to get quotes every time we have a necessity to procure these type of materials versus having a term contract. And yes, I understand that sometimes when the price increases that much, even the contractors have the right to come back to us and request a pricing because it's stated on the contract. And that's where we have the option to say no or rebid it again. But in this case, because of the fluctuation in gas, for example, some of these contracts are unstable.
One way to handle that is to find out what the index is for asphalt or petroleum or whatever the controlling commodity is, and then you go on a point. We're going to buy it or sell it at 2 over whatever index is involved. And that way, whatever fluctuation is, you don't have to worry about it. So you can add, like in commodities, there's Platts plus 2.
That's how we have the fuel. Huh? That's exactly how we handle the contract for the fuel. So where we pay the price that is every day, then we have we add their margin.
Yeah, you need your index, and then you just add whatever that margin is, and whatever it fluctuates, you're within your margins.
My concern though is, so what would happen though if tonight we were not to approve it, and then what? You don't have the material that you need, so paving is stalled for a few months until you get new bids?
We can get quotes, but once we get to spend more than $35,000, then we have to bid it out again, or bring it every time we do a purchase. So that's why it's not effective to procure this as needed. That's why we have it on a term contract.
Okay, do we have asphalt now? Or are we out of these supplies?
No, this is oil. This is not for asphalt.
Well, whatever
Asphalt
we have,
Oil,
obviously
no.
we need this?
We stock very limited quantities because typically you want to have it hot, so we purchase it, go pick it up, and utilize it whenever we're paving any of the roads that we're doing right now.
So we need it.
Yes.
And if we don't approve it, you have to send it out for bid and all of that stuff, and how long does that take?
If we don't approve it, you consume up to $35,000 within the next month easily, and then we'd go out for contracts, and that would probably take
another month and a half.
So a potential delay of several months.
potential.
And this renewal or this approval tonight is just for 1 year?
Correct.
It's 1 year.
That's my understanding. Okay.
And when would it arrive if we approve it?
Well, we purchase it as needed.
Oh, okay.
We purchase as needed, similar to gasoline.
So if it's approved and you place, if it's approved and you place an order tomorrow, when do you receive it?
That same, we schedule it for the day we need it, so if we
Oh,
need it
so it's
tomorrow,
very
we
fast.
call and get it, yes.
And no delay?
No.
So all very good points, but I think that it's a relatively short contract, and we should look at all of the things that were brought up. I totally understand that, but I also don't want to see a delay in very much needed maintenance.
One of the things that I'll just mention in regards to the asphalt, because we just had the same issue with the asphalt contract, and now we're dealing with the same issue. The fluctuation of prices that we've had in asphalt and oils is not as common as what you normally see in gasoline. It's usually, you can forecast it 3 to 4 months and we're okay. In the last couple of months, we've had a lot of fluctuation in the market, and now the vendors are becoming a little more hesitant to provide these pricings. They're wanting us to guarantee a certain amount of quantities. So I think, maybe one of the things for us to look at for the future is to consider, on a percentage basis or an index basis,
Right.
For the product itself.
Yeah, so please look at that going forward.
Definitely.
Do I have a motion on this item?
I'm going to motion to approve.
We have a motion to approve. Do I have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Motion passes. Thank you.
Next, we have our public hearings. Public hearing number 1, public hearing and action on first reading on ordinance number 2020-1652-8 to repeal and replace section 348-1500 of the Historic Preservation Plan and adopt the 2020 Historic Preservation Plan.
Is anyone not going to vote on this? Do we have a quorum or for voting on this? Or, this is for the, yeah.
I'm going to have to abstain as to 3 properties, but I don't think
And-
that prevents me from voting on the entire item.
And I will abstain from one property.
So can,
And they're not the same properties as the mayor.
Well, that would not allow the item to go through. This is an ordinance approval, so it requires at least 4 votes. So this is one of those items that we would need, if you all abstain on certain aspects of the item as it's presented, then we only have 3 available commissioners to vote on this, and it would not pass.
But we're not abstaining on the same property.
I understand, Commissioner. The problem here is that the way this item is presented, this ordinance will ask you all to vote on the adoption of the 2020 Historic Preservation Plan. Now, the way the plan is put together, all the properties are already included within the plan. So by voting with the plan, you're voting for the schedules that are contained within the plan, which contain every single property that is going to be receiving relief under this plan.
So we can't even move the table it or anything, right?
Well, my suggestion to the commission is that we pass it. I understand the situation that we have here, and I think the only way that this matter can be presented may be to perhaps parcel out the properties in question by schedules, so that if one commissioner has an objection as to perhaps one property, then he can abstain as to that individual property and not to the plan altogether, because this plan gets basically reapproved every year.
Well, that's what I was trying to say. In
Right.
other words, if the plan gets approved, I'm approving the plan, but I'm abstaining from these particular properties.
Yes, well, the problem is you can't parcel out your property because it's part of the plan altogether. So what I will be suggesting to management is that this plan be reprocessed and perhaps divided into 3 different schedules. If only 2 commissioners have objections to a specific property, then you can vote for the plan, and you can abstain from that schedule.
Schedule A or Schedule B
So
or
if we
Schedule C.
piecemeal in this fashion, I think the commission can vote, and we can do it in an ethical manner. And that's my recommendation to the board. that
Okay,
this
so
matter
then
be
what,
passed.
what action do you recommend then taking right now?
I would suggest that we just pass this item for next week, or the next available.
Okay, okay.
And I'll work with management in order to.
Everybody okay
get
with
this
that?
done.
Timeline fine with that one?
Was that a call
Mayor,
for
we
vote?
do have a timeline issue. The appraisal district has a mid-March deadline to finalize their list of properties that end up on the schedule with tax exemptions.
We're February 18, our next meeting's first week of March, so we're fine.
March 3rd, I believe.
Yeah, and if we need a special meeting, we can do that, just for this particular item. Is that fine? Okay. All right, thanks. So we'll just go ahead and pass. Does that need formal action, council?
No, just a pass will be
Okay.
enough.
All right.
Next, we have public hearing number 2, public hearing and action on first read on ordinance number 235-2020-001 to rezone from dwelling Z to general retail G for 1 acre net out of northwest corner of lot number 1, block 110, El Jardín re-subdivision in shares 23, 28, 29, 30, and 25, Espiritu Santo Grant located at 1456 North Minnesota Avenue.
Good evening, Commissioners, Mayor. This applicant is looking to change both the use district and the area district for a 1 acre property. They're going from dwelling Z to general retail G. The proposed use is actually a mixed use. It's for apartments in a retail plaza. This property is fronting North Minnesota Avenue. This is the aerial view of the property. So the predominant zoning is dwelling. There is also apartment. There is medium commercial and light commercial. This is the 200-foot buffer map. There were 14 mailouts and 0 written opposition. The request is consistent with the comprehensive plan and future land use plan. P&Z did support the approval to rezone from dwelling Z to general retail G.
Okay, this is a public hearing. Is anybody here on this item? Do I have a motion to close?
Motion to close.
Second?
We have a motion and a second. Those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Okay. We have a motion on the item.
I'll move to approve.
We have
Second?
a motion and a second to approve. Any further discussion? Those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion passes.
Next, we have public hearing number 3, public hearing and action on first read on ordinance number 235-2020-002 to rezone from dwelling A to dwelling G for Lot 7, Block 3, Ebony Heights subdivision located at 1768 Marquette Avenue.
So the applicant is looking to just change the area district of this property from A to G for the purpose of increasing the footprint of their home. This property has 0.14 acres, and it is fronting Marquette Avenue. This is the aerial view. As you can see, what predominates is single-family homes. The predominant zoning is dwelling. There is also general retail, apartments, light industrial, professional office, and medium retail. This is a 200-foot buffer map. There were 38 mailouts and 0 written opposition. The request is consistent with the comprehensive plan and future land use plan. P&Z does support the approval to rezone from dwelling A to dwelling G.
This is a public hearing. Is anybody here on this item? Do I have a motion to close?
Motion to close.
Second?
We have a motion and a second. Those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Do I have a motion? Those opposed? Motion passes. Do I have a motion on the item?
Move to approve.
Second.
We have a motion to approve and a second. Any further discussion? Those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion passes.
Public hearing number 4, public hearing and action on first read on ordinance number 235-2020-003 to rezone from dwelling A to dwelling G for Lot 9, Block 9, Alamo Heights subdivision, Section 2, in addition to the city of Brownsville located at 1128 Crockett Avenue.
So once again, the applicant is looking to rezone just the area district from A to G. The purpose of the change in area district is to be able to construct a duplex. This property has 0.14 acres, and it is fronting Crockett Avenue.
Are there other duplexes, though, immediately adjacent to it?
Not immediately adjacent, but within the subdivision, yes.
Oh, like on Bowie, that one?
Yes, on Crockett, there's some on Fannin and along Austin.
Okay.
The predominant zoning is single-family, dwelling. There is also light industrial, there is light commercial, and general retail. This is a 200-foot buffer map. There were 32 mailouts and 0 written opposition. The request is consistent with the comprehensive plan and future land use plan. P&Z supports the approval to rezone from dwelling A to dwelling G.
This is a public hearing. Is anybody here on this item? Okay. Do I have a motion to close public hearing?
So moved?
Second.
We have a motion and a second to close the public hearing. Those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion passes. Looking for a motion on the item.
Motion to approve.
We have a motion to approve. Do I have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve. Any further discussion? Those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Motion passes.
Public hearing number 5, public hearing and action on first read on ordinance number 235-2020-004 to rezone from dwelling Z, medium commercial D, medium commercial V to dwelling G for a 61.0 acre tract of land comprised of all of lots 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8-A, 8-B, block number 2 of the San Manuel Samano partition, save and accept a 0.312 acre tract, a 0.196 acre tract, a 1.209 acre tract, and a 0.242 acre tract of land located near Garden Woods Avenue.
So the The applicant is requesting to change the multiple use districts and area districts to dwelling G. The purpose is to be able to establish a residential development. This subdivision, which was titled the Applewoods subdivision, was recently approved by the Planning and Zoning Commission, and they just want to give the area a consistent or a uniform zoning to be able to accommodate the single-family development. As mentioned, the property has 61 acres and it is located near Garden Woods Avenue. This is the aerial view. As you can see, there is predominantly undeveloped land. There is single-family dwelling to the south. The predominant zoning is dwelling. There is also medium commercial, dwelling retail, and general retail. This is a 200-foot buffer map. There were 21 mailouts and 0 written opposition. The request is consistent with the comprehensive plan and future land use plan. PNZ supports the approval to rezone from dwelling Z, medium commercial G, medium commercial V, to dwelling G.
This is a public hearing. Is anybody here on this item? Do I have a motion to close?
I'll move.
We have a motion to close public hearing and a second. Any discussion? Those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Okay, motion passes. Do I have a hearing, do I have a motion on this item?
I'll move to approve the zoning request, rezoning.
We have a motion to approve. Do I have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion passes.
Public hearing number 6, public hearing and action on first reading on ordinance number 235-2020-601-CU, an ordinance allowing a conditional use permit for a wet store for Lot 97, Block 4, Section 1 of Lomas del Bosque subdivision located at 4200 Jaime J. Zapata Avenue.
So the applicant's request is to get a conditional use permit to allow the sale of alcohol for off-premises consumption. The current zoning of this property is general retail J. It consists of 0.85 acres, and the proposed use is a wet store. It's actually a meat market that wants to be able to sell beer. The property is fronting Jaime J. Zapata. This is the aerial view of the property. As you can see, there is single-family dwelling directly to the south and to the east. There is also a church and a school directly to the west, which is the primary reason for the conditional use permit request. The predominant zoning is dwelling. There is also general retail and medium industrial within the area. This is a 200-foot buffer map. There were 27 mailouts and 0 written opposition. The request is consistent with the comprehensive plan and future land use plan. PNZ supports the approval of a conditional use permit to allow the sale of alcohol for off-premises consumption in general retail J.
Okay, this is a public hearing. Is anybody here on this particular item? Do I have a motion to close?
I'll move.
We have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Those in favor?
Aye.
Those
I'll
opposed?
move to approve.
We have a motion to approve. Do I have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Motion passes.
Public hearing number 7, public hearing and action on first reading ordinance number 235-2020-901 to rezone from dwelling Z to light commercial G for lots 2, 3, and 4, block 302, El Jardín subdivision located near the intersection of Southmost Road and South Indiana Avenue.
So this is a city-initiated case. The city is looking to rezone this property that consists of 98.05 acres. We want to rezone from dwelling Z to light commercial G. The proposed use is a tactical training facility. This property was actually recently annexed January 21st of this year. It's near the intersection of Southmost Road and South Indiana Avenue. This is the aerial view of the property. As you can see, most of it is undeveloped land. There is single-family dwelling to the north and to the west. Currently, the property lies within the ETJ, but there is dwelling to the north and to the west, as well as general retail. This is a 200-foot buffer map. There were 17 mailouts and 0 written opposition. The request is consistent with the comprehensive plan and future land use plan. PNZ does support the approval to rezone from dwelling Z to light commercial G.
Okay, this is a public hearing. Is anybody here on this item? No motion to close.
I'll move.
There a motion and a second. Any discussion? Those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Okay. There a motion on the item?
I'll move to approve the rezoning request.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Motion passes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Items for individual consideration. Action item number 8, consideration and action on resolution number 2020-019 to adopt the airport master plan and authorize the city manager to approve the airport layout plan upon its completion of review and approval by the Federal Aviation Administration for the Brownsville South Padre Island International Airport.
Evening, Mayor, City Commissioners. The development of the airport master plan is to assist the airport in the city of Brownsville in a manner that coincides with the current and future aviation needs for our region. The airport master plan identifies new airport planning development recommendations consistent with the airport's current and future needs for a 20-year planning period horizon. You saw a quick synopsis of what's in the plan, and I believe Friday they dropped off a thumb drive the entire plan for you to review. The item before you is for the City Commission to adopt the airport master plan and authorize the city manager to adopt the airport layout plan after final approval from the FAA. The airport seeks approval from this for the adoption.
Okay. It's a plan, so it doesn't commit us to any sort of funding or anything. Is that correct, Mr. Bernal?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah, the adoption does not commit to any financial commitments on the city on behalf of the CIP program that's in the program.
Okay.
Motion to approve.
We have a motion to approve. Do I have a second? Motion and a second. Any further discussion? Those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Action item number 9, consideration and action to establish other post-employment benefit trust and authorize initial contribution of $1 million as per fiscal year 2020 budget.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor, City Commissioners. This item is to request Commission approval to establish and initially fund an irrevocable trust for the pre-funding of post-employment benefits for retirees. Other post-employment benefits include non-pension costs that entail health and medical and prescription coverage. With the adoption of GASB 75, the city now needs to recognize a full OPEB liability on the financials. The current actuarial estimates for the city of Brownsville OPEB liability is $54.8 million per the 2019 GASB valuations. With the rise of healthcare costs, this liability is expected to grow. Recognizing the unsustainability of this trend, the city has hired TCG to address and assist on this liability. I have Garrett Pittman with TCG that will cover this item.
Hello, good evening, Mayor, City Commissioners. So today I'd like to discuss the current and projected OPEB liability. I want to discuss that as well as some actions that other cities are taking to address this liability. As Lupe mentioned, this has really come to the forefront since 2017 with new GASB regulations requiring the disclosure and recognition of this liability on financial statements. So previous to that, under GASB 45, this liability was really just listed as a footnote. Additionally, as far as the trends over the last 10 years, we've seen healthcare costs really start to increase rather rapidly, and that is also contributing to the rise in the OPEB liability. So just a little background on this. OPEB stands for Other Post-Employment Liabilities. This is essentially healthcare costs, insurance, things like that, any retirement benefits provided outside of the pension. This is typically paid in one of two ways, either PAYGO, which is what the city currently has, which is they're paying the cost every year, or OPEB trust, which is where the city would set aside funds in a trust to grow that trust in order to offset those costs. The current liability, as Lupe mentioned, is $54 million. That's actually down significantly, $4 million in the last year since we began this project. That's due to the city's efforts to try and bring those costs down. We do anticipate that healthcare costs are still projected to rise at a fairly quick rate. We also need to recognize that the discount rate, which is used to determine the present value of this liability, is also going down, which significantly impacts the value of that liability. So for every 1% reduction in the discount rate, which the 20-year muni bond rate is used to determine, we see anywhere from an 8 to 11% increase in the OPEB liability, which is why this number has gotten to be fairly large, in the last 3 or 4 years. On the right there, you can see that schedule as far as what the OPEB liability or costs are for 2017, 18, 19. And as you can see, the projected costs are expected to rise pretty rapidly through 2036 at an amount of $6,615,000. As you can tell by looking at this, this drastically outpaces the rate of inflation. Another thing I wanted to just point out, in summary here, this is a statement made by the actuary, Mehdi Riazi, which kind of discusses some of the healthcare cost and the predicament that not only this city, but cities across the country are in. Healthcare costs really are driving this cost. And I believe in, if you look at the healthcare as a percentage of GDP, we've gone from 5% to 17.9%. And as that number continues to increase, that is directly influencing the amount of this overall OPEB liability. So as far as solutions to this problem, solution one here is essentially continue with pay-go. So we continue to pay the cost as they accumulate. That is going to be heavily contingent on the discount rate, which is heavily influenced by the Fed rate, which has come down significantly in the last year, and we project to also come down throughout the rest of the year, as well as healthcare costs. So if we do see a rapid increase in healthcare costs, we could easily see this OPEB liability increase substantially over the next year. This is a chart provided with numbers from the actuary. You can see here on the bottom left, 2019, OPEB liability is currently $54 million. By 2030, if we just continue to pay the cost and nothing else, that number jumps to $94 million. By 2050, that number is over $200 million. So, we have essentially a cost which is, again, rising dramatically based on healthcare assumptions. The second option is the fully funding option. And essentially what that does is establish an OPEB trust under Section 115. And this would essentially allow the city to recognize a different discount rate than what's currently be assumed with the 20-year muni bond. And the way that they're able to do that is by using returns associated with investments. So as opposed to having a 20-year bond, which is somewhat lower in yield, we're able to use a mix of both stocks and bonds to achieve a higher discount rate of 6.25%, which dramatically lowers the liability. The annual contributions for this would be $2.15 million over 30 years. The new discount rate would be applied to the entire OPEB liability immediately, which would in turn reduce the liability from 54 million to 43 million, essentially overnight. The downfall of this is, of course, it's very expensive, and in my conversations with management, probably a little bit untenable at this point. What we did is work on a solution that we tried to, take at least some initial steps to reduce this liability, but it would involve essentially a two-pronged approach. So, A, putting some money aside, although not the amount to fully fund it, but also working with city management to see if there's ways we can cut costs over the next 5 years to make this number a little bit more tenable. What we're essentially recommending today is not only the establishment of an OPEB liability trust, which we would fund and use those funds to offset future costs and liabilities, but also working with city management over the next 5 years to put a plan in place to reduce those costs going forward. And essentially what this would do is allow us to utilize the returns of the stock and bond markets to have an asset that's essentially offsetting that liability and growing at a pace that outpaces the rise in healthcare costs.
So if we do that, the OPEB trust, and you invest in stocks, is it limited to stocks that, or not stocks, like funds that only create like a 1 or 2% return?
No, and that's the main benefit of an OPEB trust. So when they put forth the regulations regarding a Section 115, they wanted to give cities a way to invest outside of the funds that are currently regulated by the Public Funds Investment Act. So right now, if you all wanted to offset this, you all would be fairly limited as far as the assets you could put in there. They would be very conservative, AAA government securities, government bonds. With this, you are able to invest in a way more consistent with how pensions invest, in that they're investing in mutual funds, stocks, and bonds with an expected growth rate of much higher than 6 or 7%.
Okay. Do you have any motions on this, or does anybody have any more questions?
But then today, we're just voting on setting aside $1 million, and then we would have to vote later on how to invest that money or what strategy?
Yeah, so tonight, great question. So tonight, it's to approve the establishment of the trust, and as part of the budget process for fiscal 19, $1 million was set aside from the bridge fund to initially fund the trust. From here on out, we'll be engaging with the commission through the forecasting process, and we're going to now work on scenarios on gradually reducing the benefits, and then working backward and seeing how can we tie that with the contribution that's a lot more reasonable, affordable, and that we can then sustain to amortize the cost over 30 years. These two scenarios just show you kind of the value added of investing through this approach. What we haven't reflected here is combining this with a reduction in benefits. What we want to consider doing is trying to see about looking out for the longer tenured employees that have been here for a longer period of time, that perhaps have that expectation that they would get some benefit at retirement. But ultimately, if you look at that 2.15 number, what we were offering as a retirement benefit, if we had quantified that the way that we are now doing this, because really Gatsby has kind of forced the city's hand, it's really not affordable for us. And the one way that I've described it to staff is we get about $1.5 million of net revenue coming into the city to fund general government overall. This would take almost 100% of that just to fund the OPEB liability, so that's just impractical. So what we would have to do is find an incremental way of combining benefit reduction, being transparent with the employees about what to expect over the next 5-10 years, and then seeing what is a fee or what is an amount that we can annually contribute to start to demonstrate that we're funding this thing proactively. Because what can happen overall is last year during the financial audit, the auditor brought this up for the first time because he's now required to do it. And every year he's going to come back and remind us, your OPEB liability, your OPEB liability. This at least shows, hey, we have a trust, we have $1 million, and we're working on a plan. So between now and the budget, you will see options to then implement a strategy for the long term.
So you're taking the $1 million from the bridge fund?
Some surplus money that was available in the bridge fund.
So when you say surplus?
So we used less money, so the transfer to the general fund, we didn't have to use all that amount last year, so we instead are going to use some of that to start this.
How much is left in the bridge fund?
There's about over $6 million, Lupe.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's because we're using the bridge fund to facilitate crossings at the border with our MOU that we have with the government. And Semana Santa's coming up, and Charles is here. So I'm just concerned that you're not going to utilize all that money for this and not be able to use it for facilitating the bridge crossings.
No, we're not. That's not the plan. We wouldn't recommend that. I mean, the bridge fund is not it's a volatile source of funding. What we did is took advantage of the fact that general fund didn't have to utilize all the transfer that it typically gets and set that aside. Now we have the homework of finding what is an annual contribution amount from general fund, because this is a general fund.
But you're just jump-starting it with this bridge fund this time, right?
It's just seed money.
Right.
So start growing it, because as Mr. Pittman's mentioned, now at least this thing is growing at a rate that it can counter the cost of healthcare. And when you don't have that at all, you're losing money every year that it's not compounding in your favor. So.
Okay, well, are we ready for a motion?
Any other questions? No? Okay.
I'll make that motion.
We have a motion to approve.
Second.
And a second. Any further discussion? Those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Motion passes. Thank you.
Action item number 10, consideration and action to acknowledge the Finance Director's financial statements and cash investment report for the City of Brownsville for fiscal year ended December 31st, 2019.
Honorable Mayor, City Commissioners, I'll be brief. Try to be brief on the financials. This is the first quarter ended December 31st. Some financial highlights. Tax levies are in par of last year. They're trending positively. Sales tax is also trending positively. We're about 125,000 more than last year. Unemployment rate continues to maintain at low rates. Hotel motel taxes, we had an increase about $58,000 through the same period as last year. PB cash transfer increased compared to last year's numbers by $65,000. Excluding airport terminal project valuation for 2018, building permits increased by 35.4% over the same quarter of last year. Based on the December's numbers, Veteran Bridge are being leveled off. They haven't increased, so that's something to kind of look at. Utility expenditures are slightly higher than last year's, or about $85,000 more than the same period of last fiscal year. I'll be going over general fund real quick. On the revenues and expenditures, revenues are indicated in the budget in red, and actuals are indicated in blue. As you'll see, revenues, for the first quarter, we have an increase of revenues because of property taxes coming in. So our revenues for the first quarter outpace our expenditures. Sales tax revenues, you got a history of your sales tax revenues from actuals to 2014 to 2019 and through the first quarter of December 2015. You see there's incremental increases year over year except for fiscal year 2017. And we have a slight increase of about 1.7% over last year. Veterans Bridge, again, they're stable. It's increasing, but stable. PUB transfers for the first quarter of December 2019 are $2.5 million, and utility consumption $1.1 million. And this is just a chart. This chart is in your packet. If you have any questions, this is a comparison between the first quarter fiscal year 2019 to 2020, and also comparison to the 2020 budget. As you'll see in the first column in there, you have fees and services. You'll see a significant decrease on there. Please note that this is related to when we established the landfill fund. We moved some of the revenues that were generated in the general fund. We moved over to the landfill fund, so that's why you'll see that decrease in there. Those revenues are recorded actually in the general fund. As you'll see, most of them are positive increases over last quarter. Similar to expenditures, you have governmental, public safety, public works. Under public works and sanitation, similar expenditures that were once recorded in the general fund and now recorded in the landfill fund. All departments are trending positively. And the rest of the information is there. Do you have any questions you want me to go over? No.
Can you send that to me via email, please?
Absolutely.
I was going to ask for the same thing, Lupe, if you would, please. Yeah. Thanks.
Will do. Yes.
And that presentation was actually really easy to understand. The graphics help a lot. Thanks.
Motion to approve, or to acknowledge, correct?
Acknowledge,
Okay,
just acknowledge.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to acknowledge. Any further discussion? Those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Motion passes. Thank you.
Action item number 11. Consideration and action on resolution number 2020-011 supporting the Texas Department of Housing and Community Affairs application for a proposed affordable housing community known as Brownsville Lofts to be located at 1860 Central Boulevard, providing for City of Brownsville financial support and dealing with related matters.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor, City Commissioners. We're actually bringing these items 11, 12, 13, and 14 as a complete packet.
Okay.
They're all resolutions of support. Staff is recommending to support or basically grant the city's support to all 4 tax credit projects. We think that there's obviously a gap and a need for affordable housing. Due to time constraints, we're not able to actually go through the ranking and the scoring of each application. And in order for them to meet the deadline and not lose the points that this resolution when essentially provide to them, we're thinking of recommending the support for each project. So essentially, we have 4 low-income housing tax credit applications. In In the memo that was provided, the projects are located at 1860 Central Boulevard, which is near the Pizza Hut on Central Boulevard. Luna Vista Apartments located at 3705 Boca Chica Boulevard, which is near the Four Corners. El Brillo, which is located at 995 Old Port Isabel, which is close to Hannah High School. And BCC Village is actually near the Brownsville Country Club. It's near Mallorca Court and Mallorca Avenue. So we'll be happy to answer any questions. These are 9% low-income housing tax credits. They're all new construction projects. And
It's a competitive statewide application. Our role is merely to allow the city commission the opportunity to consider resolutions of support of the application, not specific projects.
Okay.
So we think all the tax credit applicants are qualified, they're experienced with TDHCA's 9% tax credit program. We think they'd all be good.
Are we allowed to approve all together or individually?
I think just for clarity, as long as whoever moves mentions the four distinct numbers, since we're all presented at the same time, I think that may be sufficient.
Okay.
Sorry,
May
motion.
may I read all of them then?
Is
Action item.
that necessary? Is it necessary to read the items? Or?
Normally, we do read them.
Okay.
So if we could, I think that may be best.
Okay.
Action item number 12, consideration and action on resolution number 2020-012, supporting the Texas Department of Housing and Community Affairs application for a proposed affordable housing community known as Luna Vista to be located at 3705 Boca Chica Boulevard, providing for City of Brownsville financial support and dealing with related matters. Action item number 13, consideration and action on resolution number 2020-013, supporting the Texas Department of Housing and Community Affairs application for a proposed affordable housing community known as El Brillo to be located at 995 Old Port Isabel Road, providing for City of Brownsville financial support and dealing with related matters. Action item number 14, consideration and action on resolution number 2020-014, supporting the Texas Department of Housing and Community Affairs application for a proposed affordable housing community known as BBC Village to be located near Mallorca Court and Mallorca Avenue, providing for the City of Brownsville financial support and dealing with related matters.
And can I just go on the record that the one on 3705 Boca Chica Boulevard, the entity that's trying to develop that has Golansky in the name, but I have no relation to them. I'm assuming it's because it's close to Golansky Street, but I have no idea who it is. No, you're correct. Okay.
Motion
Okay.
to approve item 11, 12, 13, and 14.
We have a motion to approve items 11, 12, 13, and 14. Do I have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Those in favor? Aye. Those opposed? Motion passes. Motions, items 11 through 14 pass. Thank you.
Action item number 15, consideration and action to award the proposal to Rabbi Kistner for the culvert improvements project on West Brownsville drainage improvements in the amount of $69,511 with 2 cents as budgeted.
Good afternoon once again, Commissioner Mayor. This item is in reference to Texas Water Development Board loan, and this project in particular is for environmental assessment for 9 culvert crossings. For sake of time, if you need me to read them, I can.
I reviewed it.
Okay.
Fine.
And once we complete this environmental assessment, we'll be able to set up some gauges that'll help us determine flow, resaca levels, the depths, and connect it to our SCADA system. If y'all have any questions, I'll be glad to answer.
Did you put it out for bids for the engineering, or did you go through that new list system?
This is through our rotation list from environmental engineers.
Yeah, I'm having issue with that system, but okay. So then let me ask you, within your department, do you all estimate how much the engineering costs?
We estimate a budget for the project. We send it over to purchasing and request the next engineer that's on rotation for that particular project or that can provide those services. In this particular one, we have 4 and we utilize them on a regular basis. I can tell you that in the next month, you'll probably see me up here often with our CIP contracts, referencing that contract, because we have 4 contracts for the capital improvement projects for the roads, and we're gonna have 3 projects for the environmental work that's gonna be needed for the Texas Water Development Board. There's one for each one of the projects, so the 4 engineers, they each get their fair share based on the budget. And then that, my understanding is that gets adjusted once the actual contracts are awarded to make sure that it stays pretty even amongst them.
So is their price quote comparable to what the department estimated would be the engineering costs?
On this particular project, yes.
Okay. Any other questions? Do you have any more?
Just so you know, on engineering services, we're not allowed to, we go out for proposals to qualify the firms. We don't go out for proposals on actual price because it's against the board requirement.
But then, so are all the four or engineering companies that are on the list, are they Brownsville? Or
When this particular one, Rabbi Kistner,
they have a
they
location
still
at
have a
UB.
local office.
Right.
Yes.
The letterhead was from McAllen, but I know
Yes.
they have a
Yeah,
local
they're
office. Okay.
But are the other 3 also Brownsville entities?
Well, yeah, McAllen, the Rio Grande Valley, for sure. I think Rabbi Kistner is the only one that has a Brownsville office. PSI had one. I don't think they have one currently. They're in
But
Hardin.
the vendors on this rotation, Mr. Garcia, they've been previously approved by the
Yes.
city commission, right? Okay.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes, this is just obviously because of the amount being over 35,000, we have to go through the formality of city commission.
Okay.
Motion to approve?
We have a motion to approve. Do I have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Those in favor? Aye. Those opposed? Motion passes. Thank you.
Action item number 16, consideration and action for authorization to purchase traffic signal equipment for the FM 802 detection project in the amount of $149,761.62 as budgeted.
For this particular project, we used some, last year, you approved some traffic timing devices that have been installed already throughout the city. Now what we're doing is finalizing or fixing all the loops that are damaged that can provide the data that's necessary for the equipment that we have to function adequately and provide better timing to our signals. In this particular corridor, it's from FM 802 from the expressway to Hudson. Currently, just based on the timing improvements, we've improved timing by 2.5 minutes with this pods. And for this particular contract, it's only the equipment. The city will be installing the actual pods on the actual ground. And we're looking at least for a 3-minute improvement once the system is completely set up. We have 2 vendors that we have looked at. It's Nastec and Trafficware, and they're both on the buy board. We opted to go with Trafficware for the simple reason that their compatibility is greater with the current system that we have, and their capabilities are more in line with what we're looking for to provide us traffic counts, the speed of traffic, and more reliable data that will help us improve traffic on all our corridors. Right now, we're only doing the corridor, like I said, from FM 802 from the expressway to Hudson, but once again, we are looking to come back with future corridors in the near future. Do y'all have any questions?
I'm impressed how efficient it's becoming.
Slowly but
the
surely.
timing, yeah.
I have a question. On roads that are serviced by TxDOT, the traffic signals are our responsibility, or
Maintenance is by the city.
The maintenance only, but the new equipment, TxDOT
Correct.
buys. So just want to make sure.
Yeah, and just so you, get an idea, 90% of our loops are damaged, and that's what this is starting to replace.
Okay.
Okay. Any other questions? Do you have any motions?
I move to approve.
Second?
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Motion passes.
Action item number 17, consideration and action to award a contract for street rehabilitation for Jose Marti Boulevard, Calle Norteña, Calle Costa Rica, and Calle Buenos Aires under the term contract for rotation list for engineering and surveying services, contract number QES-25-0417 with Ambiotech Civil Engineering Group, Inc., Brownsville, Texas, for task order number 62 for a lump sum of $220,000 with $220,000 with $33.
The following task order is one of 4 that'll be coming. We have 4 contracts that'll be coming, 1 for each district, and we have 4 different engineers that are, very comparable in the amounts. Just so you all are aware of the other engineers, it's going to be Gonzalez Engineering, Plagar, and Half and Associates. Currently, we're presenting for Ambiotech, who's the one that had the least amount of utility conflicts on the roads that they're working on. That's why you have this one before you here today. And this is in part of our capital improvement projects. And this is the streets for District Number 3. If y'all have any questions, I'll be more than glad to answer them for you.
Wait, so how many engineers are in this rotation?
7?
And you estimated that the cost would be around 200,000?
We estimated 250 for each one of these projects that'll be coming up. On all of them will be below.
So you said 4 different engineers on these 4 different projects, and then the
On this
costs were all
particular one-
comparable, right?
I'm sorry?
The costs were all comparable for
They're
these projects?
within the 200 range.
Okay,
Yeah, and then you'll see those coming up in the following meetings.
okay.
But then you pick first who you're gonna give it to, and then they give you a price estimate, right? It's not like you get quotes from all the
No,
ones in
we
the
go
rotation.
based on the next engineer, based on the amount of work that they've been awarded. That's how it's the next engineer selected. Robert can speak more in reference to that.
We do have a price matrix that we established when we awarded the contract. So we go by the matrix. And then, of course, the rotation list.
For the selection of who's next.
Oh, yeah, we do have the rotation list, and we try to maintain an equal balance on the work that they get.
It might be helpful to put that in the packet. Who's up next, just so we know.
Will do.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
I'm gonna vote against it, but only because I don't like the system, this wheel system.
Okay, I haven't called it yet, but do we have any motions to approve?
Motion to approve.
We have a motion to approve. Do I have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed?
Me.
Commissioner Galansky, okay. 3-1, council, does that still pass?
It passes.
Okay, motion passes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have the executive session. Executive Session 8, discussion and deliberation regarding real property pursuant to Section 551.072 of the Texas Government Code related to the possible purchase, exchange, lease, or value of real property in connection to bids received from the Cameron County Tax Resale on November 5th, 2019, where deliberation and an open meeting would have a detrimental effect on the position of the governmental body in negotiations with a third person. Executive Session B, consultation.
I'm going to request that item B be passed. Ms. Heather Scott, representing the firm that's representing the city in this case, was unable to be here, and she requested that I present that to the commission, and if it could be considered in the next meeting.
Sure.
Executive Session C, consultation with attorney pursuant to Section 551.071A of the Texas Government Code on a matter related to the pending litigation in case style Hilario de Leon versus the City of Brownsville, cost number 2020-DCL-00718, 107 District Court in Cameron County, Texas.
Okay, do we have any motions to go into executive session?
So motion.
We have a motion and a second. Those in favor? Aye. Those opposed? Okay. Executive session.
possible action on any items as discussed in executive session.
Do I have any motions?
Motion to,
May I read the first one?
again?
Action Executive A, discussion and possible action on resolution numbers 2020-020 through resolution number 2020-024, approving or rejecting the bid offer received on the tax resale properties on November 5th, 2019.
Motion to proceed with the sale of the properties as described and explained to us by Linebarger and Associates in executive session.
We have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion passes.
Motion to adjourn.
We have a motion to adjourn. Do I have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? We stand adjourned. Thank you.